Hello, grade twos. Because we learned about a lot of things during our unit on westward expansion, I wanted to take this class time to review all of the things that we've learned together. So, westward expansion happened from 1803 to 1853, and let's take a look at the major events that we covered together. So, what exactly is westward expansion? Westward expansion is the name given to a time in American history between 1803 to 1853 when the United States grew to twice its size and spread far to the west. President Thomas Jefferson, as you can see on the right, bought a huge land from France in the west. So many people, known as pioneers, began to settle and build homes on this new land because they were looking for better lives. People thought that they were able to build better lives in this land because the lands were much cheaper here. So it was much more affordable for them. By 1853, 7 million people had settled in the West. So the people that traveled through the Oregon Trail in order to go to the west and settle down are called pioneers. And as you can see on the left image, they traveled by wagons that were led by horses, mules, or oxen. And remember that we talked about that they had so many things to put in their wagons that they didn't really ride on these wagons except for young children. They could ride inside, but all the adults had to travel alongside their wagons on foot. And it was extremely difficult for them because the journey was 2,000 miles long and it took up to 6 months for them to travel. Many pioneer families traveled together in wagon trains, and at night they formed their wagons into a large circle for safety. The pioneers faced many challenges as they traveled, such as sickness, bad weather, and also the loss of their horses and oxen. Sometimes they even lacked of food and water, and they had to go back to where they came from if they ran out of water. And many people died on the journey. Eventually, millions of people would travel the Oregon Trail. The ruts made by their wagon wheels can still be seen today. This map shows the path of the Oregon Trail. People started from the Mississippi River and they travel all the way through the Rocky Mountains and to the west. Another event that we learned together is called the Erie Canal. During the time of westward expansion, canals were built to connect rivers and lakes. A canal is a man made wide, deep ditch that allows water to flow from one place to another. The famous Erie Canal connected the east to the west and made it much easier to move heavy freight to other places. The canal also gave settlers a new form of transportation. People could now travel faster and farther west to cities where there were no rivers. Strong horses or oxen walked along the canal pulling flat-bottomed boats. The boats carried coal, grain, lumber, and passengers. Towns and cities were soon built along the Erie Canal. And of course, we can't forget about Robert Livingston and Robert Fulton that came up with the steamboat. In the early 1800s, Robert Livingston was sent to France by President Thomas Jefferson as an American ambassador. While in France, Mr. Livingston met a talented engineer named Robert Fulton. Robert Livingston had failed many times trying to invent a steamboat on his own. In 1803, Livingston hired Robert Fulton as his partner. And Mr. Livingston wanted Robert Fulton to design a steamboat. Being a wealthy businessman, he agreed to pay all costs for Robert Fulton to build a working steamboat. By 1807, he had done it. Robert Fulton had designed and built the first successful commercial steamboat during its first voyage. The steamboat sailed up the Hudson River in New York at 5 miles per hour, which was a lot faster than boats that existed before. So, one of the advantages that the steamboats had was that it solved the problem where people could travel both upstream and downstream. Flatboats could only travel one way downstream, so people had to come back on foot or by horseback. And the steamboat, because it was able to travel from one way to the other, it perfectly solved such problem. Robert Fulton later redesigned his steamboat to carry passengers. The invention of the steamboat was important to westward expansion. It changed the way people traveled and did business. By 1820, steamboats carry people and goods through canals and up and down major rivers. Also, do you remember about the Pony Express? The Pony Express was a mail service that ran from 1860 to 1861. Its riders delivered letters and small packages from St. Joseph, Missouri to Sacramento, California. Young men riding horses carry saddlebags of mail across the country, stopping at relay stations along a 2,000-mile trail. Pony Express riders require great endurance. That means they had to be very strong and persistent. They only stopped to rest and change horses about every 90 to 120 miles. Their route was extremely risky and they met many dangers. The Pony Express path was very dangerous for the young men because they had to face bad weather, injuries, and hostile tribes. Many young riders died. On November 7, 1860, Pony Express riders carried the news of Abraham Lincoln's election as president from Nebraska to California in a record of 5 days. This was considered one of the most significant accomplishments of the Pony Express. By using the Pony Express, it would take about 2 days to deliver a letter from New York to California, and then mail then had to be carried by stagecoaches to California, which could take up about 1 month. As seen on the left, this is the advertisement that they would post on walls to recruit young men who could be working for the Pony Express. The riders were paid $25 each week. At that time, this was a lot of money. The Pony Express only lasted for about 1 year. The invention of the telegraph soon replaced the Pony Express as a faster way to communicate and send messages to far away places. Have you ever wondered who invented the telegraph? It was Samuel Morse who invented the first electrical telegraph in the United States in 1837. The telegraph worked by sending signals over a wire between poles. The telegraph system used Morse code. Morse code is a system invented by Samuel Morse, made up of electronic dots and dashes that represent letters and numbers. Telegraph operators translated the code into words. I'm sure some of you have seen this Morse code system before. So this is what it looks like. The letters and numbers are represented by a dot or dash. A dot has a short sound, whereas a dash has a long sound. So why don't you go ahead and try creating a message using this Morse code system. I'll give you a couple of seconds. Last but not least, we've learned about the Transcontinental Railroad. In 1869, the Transcontinental Railroad was completed. It played an important role during the time of westward expansion. The railroad stretched across the West and took 6 years and thousands of workers to complete. Traveling by train was easier, safer, and much faster than traveling by covered wagon. Not only could people travel west to settle, but goods such as coal, iron, crops, and livestock could now be transported by land rather than by boat. Once the Transcontinental Railroad was built, fewer people traveled on the Oregon Trail. Those who could not afford the train still made the journey west by covered wagon on the Oregon Trail. And do you remember about Michael's ancestor, Ling Wei, who was a Chinese immigrant that came all the way from China to the United States in order to build the railroad? There were a lot of Chinese immigrants that built the railroad, and building the railroad was a hard and dangerous job with harsh working conditions. Railroad workers faced many challenges and worked 12 hours a day, 6 days a week. They dealt with harsh weather in the west. In the east, blizzards, freezing temperatures, and avalanches made building the railroads even more difficult. Avalanches are masses of snow, ice, and rocks that fall fast down a mountainside. So we can ask, was Transcontinental Railroad successful in contributing to westward expansion? It's got some advantages and also disadvantages. We've talked about the advantages were that it helped people to travel much faster, but there were some disadvantages of building the Transcontinental Railroad because it had very unfair and sad consequences for Native Americans who originally lived there before everybody else came to move to their land. The railroad companies built tracks and telegraph poles through land where Native Americans had lived for thousands of years. The Iron Horse, as it was nicknamed, scared away bison. Workers killed the sacred buffalo the plains Native Americans hunted for food. The tribes knew the railroads would bring more settlers to their land and endanger their way of life. I hope this review video was helpful for you to remember what we've learned so far. Please refer to Google Classroom so that you can make a timeline including all of these events that we just went over together. Good luck!